Welcome to the February 1st, 2024 meeting of the Chatham Finance Committee. I'm Joanne Sprague, Vice Chair, filling in for our Chairman, Stephen Daniel, who's attending the memorial service for his late father, Ron Daniel. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone is recording this meeting, please notify the Chairman. Pursuant to Governor Healy's March 29, 2023 signing of the Acts of 2023, extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law until March 31, 2025, this meeting of the Chatham Finance Committee is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 698-918-859 #, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Chatham TV, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. First, we'll call the meeting to order with a roll call vote. Kristen Andres.
Here.
Tracy Shields.
Here.
Barbara Madison.
Here.
John Papalardo. Not here. Tommy Doan.
Here.
Andy Young.
Here.
Stephen Daniel, absent, and the chair is here. Today, we welcome our new finance director, Carrie Mazzarol, and we're going to be hearing the Public Safety Department budget, and with us we have Chief Michael Anderson of the Police Department and Chief Justin Tavano of the Fire Department. Carrie, do you want to start this out with, okay, I'll turn it over to you then.
Okay, thank you. Today, the Public Safety Department will be presenting their requested budgets for fiscal year 2025. The public safety budget is presented at $8.1 million, an increase of $304,654 over the current fiscal year budget. The Police Department budget presented includes the departmental budget of $3.5 million, up $3.47 from 2024. The animal control budget includes an operating budget of $79,095, and there are no changes to the expense lines, just a contractual increase to salaries. The fire department budget is presented at $4.5 million, up 4.26% over the current fiscal year budget. The emergency management budget is level funded for 2025 at $52,850, which includes salaries and expenses. The Cape and Islands EMS budget is level funded for 2025 at $5,990, and the oil and pollution control budget is level funded for 2025 at $500. The capital requests for the following divisions include the following in amounts. The Police Department capital requests are $16,000 for portable radio equipment, $150 for body-worn camera program, and $120 for 2 replacements of cruisers. The Fire Department capital requests are $50,000 for protective clothing, $10,000 for mobile and portable radios, $10,000 for self-contained breathing apparatus, and $54,720 for the replacement of an admin vehicle. The emergency management capital request is for $40,000 for generators. And I have the police and fire chief here with me to go over their 2025 requested budgets.
I see Fire Chief Tavano is with us first, but I want to say, please forgive me, I'm omitted to say that also from our police department is Lieutenant Goddard here with us, not to be forgotten.
All right, I think we're going a little out of order according to the agenda. I hope that's okay with you guys.
Sure.
Chief Anderson and I rolled the dice, and I wanted to go first. So it's great to see everybody. Thank you for having me here today to present the FY25 budget for the fire department, emergency management department, and 2 smaller budgets, the Cape and Islands EMS assessment and the oil pollution control budget. The fire department's proposing, as the finance director mentioned, just over a $4.5 million operating budget for FY25, which represents a 4.26 increase over FY24. Most of the budget increases for FY25 are related to personnel expenses. These increases on the personnel side of the budget are primarily contractual, totaling $4,017,265. The increases on the expense side of the budget are mostly either inflationary or due to increases in service contracts and fees. And this accounts for $490,358 of the total FY25 operating budget. Fire department's not seeking any new positions in FY25, and we're not proposing any significant changes in services. Calendar year 23 was a busy one. It was the busiest on record for CFD in terms of total incident responses and total ambulance transports. The additional staff added to our roster in FY22 and FY23, thanks in large part to your committee, has proven critical in the department's ability to meet the growing needs of the community. The current staff at the Chatham Fire Department is by far the most passionate, dedicated, and motivated that I've witnessed during my employment with the town. As the chief of the department, I'd like to thank the select board, the finance committee, the town manager, the finance director, and the taxpayers for continuing to provide the necessary funding, allowing our first responders to perform their duties safely, efficiently, effectively, and I'd also like to thank my staff for continuing to set the bar and the standard for public safety excellence across the Cape and Islands. The emergency management budget request represents a slight reduction from the FY24 budget, as the vehicle line item totaling $2,000 has been removed. The operating supplies line accounts for a majority of the expense side of this budget. These funds are utilized for a variety of operational expenditures throughout the year and will also be utilized to support the BOC CERT. Our CERT team is a group of volunteers, BOC standing for Brewster, Orleans, Chatham, and Harwich. And this is a volunteer organization which has been largely grant funded. However, members have incurred out-of-pocket expenses since the team's inception, and each of the 4 municipalities has been asked to allocate $2,500 annually to support the team. So with that, I'm going to get into my PowerPoint presentation here.
By the way, before the chief gets into his presentation, are there any questions from the committee so far? And one more note, with the fire chief and the police chief here, I want to tell you that we understand that every day you put those uniforms on, you put your lives on the line for all of us in Chatham, and we want you to know that we appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Tracy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did think of a question. I was just wondering on your opinion as to why it was the busiest year for you guys. Just that.
So we're gonna the first section of my slides is gonna go over some incident data. We're gonna look at kind of a calendar year 23 in review. So maybe I'll address some of that during those. If not, just come right back to me. All right. So our first slide here, we're gonna look at 10-year look back at total call volume, beginning in 2014 and extending out to 2023 most recently. So prior to 2023, our busiest year was 2022. We did go up slightly in 2023, making it the busiest year. It was a very small increase in call volume. It was just 1%. So if we look at the data, I presented a little bit of this last year as well. We saw this weird spike in 2018. We're not sure what happened in 2018 to drive call volume up so significantly from the year prior. But then, we can see 2019 is pretty similar to 2018, and then we had the COVID dip in 2020, where we saw a significant decrease in the number of calls that we were going on. Folks were afraid to go to the hospital, all the uncertainty over COVID. They were afraid to go to the hospital for routine ailments, not out of the anxiety of maybe catching COVID with the unknowns up there. So that represented the big decrease in 2020. But then we rebounded in 2021, and you can see we've made incremental increases each year after that. It's hard to say, Tracy, to address your question, what is driving call volume. What we have noticed is that there's more people here throughout greater portions of the year. I don't think that's any secret to anybody in any of the industries around town. We're just seeing more people work remote. More people have moved out of their offices in the city. They've converted their homes into no longer seasonal homes, but year-round living. Whether they're here just on the weekends or they're staying and working throughout the week and working remotely from down here, we've definitely seen just an increase in the number of people that are here. So I'd say that's probably the biggest driver since 2020 as we've rebounded from COVID. Andy?
Andy?
Chief, I'm always curious of this large number of this, the woodpecker, thank you, of this large number of calls, how much of that is EMS and how much is fire?
It's a good question. It's coming right up in one of our next few slides.
I might have known.
The next slide we're going to look at is just a kind of drilling down a little bit more. So the previous slide was total incidents that we've responded to. This looks at our total ambulance transports. So again, the trend is very similar to the previous slide we looked at. We saw a spike in 2018 and then leveled off in 2019, dipped in 2020, and then steadily increased thereafter. Our ambulance revenue, for this I looked at the fiscal year rather than the calendar year, just to be consistent with our fiscal policies. So for fiscal year 23, our ambulance revenue was about $843,000, which you can see was almost a $100,000 increase from FY22. So pretty significant increase there, and going back to years prior, the ambulance revenue is way up, and we've had no change in our ambulance rates that we're charging. So that's good news. We're getting better reimbursements from Medicare. Some of that is due to the better quality assurance and quality improvement we're doing in-house and regionally with the way that our reports are being written and delivered to the hospital. Calls are therefore being coded more appropriately. The better that the reports are written, the better the coding is on the types of calls that we're transporting people for, the more reimbursements we're going to get. So that's good news on that front. And projected out for FY24, we're already ahead of where we were in FY23. So I'm expecting that number to go up by about another 5%.
Chief, related to this, it's always nice to see the ambulance revenue going up, but on the other hand, I assume it's still the case that if somebody needs an ambulance, they're going to get a ride whether they can pay for it or not.
Yep, our primary responsibility is public safety, and we encourage anybody that needs to go to the hospital to call 911. We're going to show up, and we deal with the emergency first and foremost.
Okay, no, I'm delighted that we still do that. I assumed we did, but it's always nice to get it out to the public.
Yep, and I should note too that a large majority of our ambulance revenue is derived from Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement.
Right. Thank you.
So this speaks to your previous question before, Andy. This is our incident type breakdown. So here's just a pie chart representing the types of calls we go on. 9 generic categories. These categories are determined by the National Fire Incident Reporting System, which we report all our data to, along with a majority of the fire and EMS departments around the country. So the gray area represents rescue and EMS type calls. So that's going to be obviously our ambulance transports. With that, it's any ambulance call we go on, whether we transport the person or not. Rescue, the rescue portion of that could be searching for people lost on land, rescuing water rescues, searching for people lost on the water, any type of rescue or medical service scenario. So that was 2,048 incidents in 2023 out of our 3,275, representing 62.5% of our calls. And that's been pretty consistent over the years to see somewhere between 62 and 65% of our total call volume being related to rescue and EMS. Some other kind of big chunks of the pie here in the light blue around 9 o'clock. We see our service calls, that's around 9.5% for 314 total calls. These are calls that kind of fall into a category that aren't necessarily emergencies, but people need assistance with. So it could be a water leak, maybe somebody locked out of a vehicle, somebody locked inside of a home, the need to get access to a home for somebody that might be to do a well-being check, things of that nature that don't turn out to be emergencies, but it's really preventative of emergency, of something that could become an emergency if it's not dealt with up front. And then another big chunk is our false alarm and false calls at just over 15.5%, 512 total calls in 2023. So our false alarms and false calls are just what they sound like. People's smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors are going off. They either malfunction. It's not just malfunctions, it's also when they're activated from smoke from cooking, smoke from fireplaces, things of that nature. And that's not just residential, that's commercial as well. So it could be an unintentional activation of a sprinkler system in a commercial building, things kind of all of that nature. That we respond as though it might be an emergency. We get there and investigate to find out that there wasn't an actual emergency there. So while that's a big number, it's, like I said, a little over 15.5%. It is a big number, but you know, the more the town grows, the more people are living here, the more commercial, the more commerce we have, the more requirements there are to have those systems in place, and the more systems there are, the more they're going to malfunction. Here's a look at our staffing structure at the fire department. So there's myself and a deputy chief, we're the two administrators. We also have 2 day positions, an EMS captain and a fire inspector. So they work Monday through Friday during regular business hours. They're also available, they are firefighters. Our fire inspector is a firefighter and an EMT, and our EMS captain is a firefighter and a paramedic. So they're also available during their working hours to supplement staff if we have simultaneous calls. We have 4 shifts. So with that, there's a captain and a lieutenant assigned to each shift. So there's 4 captains and 4 lieutenants on the department. And then underneath the captains and lieutenants, we have 5 firefighters per shift, totaling 20 firefighters. Of the 20 firefighters, 14 are paramedics and 6 are EMTs. Here's just a list of our fleet on the department, so our apparatus and vehicles. We have 2 fire pumpers, so 2 engines. We have a mini pumper, which is, it's got all the capacity of a regular pumper truck. It's just on a smaller chassis. It's on a Ford F-550 chassis. So a little bit more maneuverability. It's just some of the smaller streets, some of the cottage colonies. So that we added that to the fleet about 4 years ago. And I'll get back to the asterisks in just a moment on that. We have our Quint, which is our ladder truck. We operate 3 ambulances. Our high water vehicle, that's the Army truck you might have seen driving around, especially lately with all the flooding in town, which we use to access people on the other side of flood areas or when they become stranded into some of those into the floodwaters. We have 4 administrative or staff vehicles, 2 of which are take-home. Myself and the deputy chief both have take-home vehicles. The fire inspector has a vehicle that stays at the station and he uses during his business hours. And then the 4th is shared between the EMS captain and the on-duty shift. That vehicle also is used by staff personnel when they're attending training classes out of town, off Cape, and in some cases out of state. We have a service vehicle, which is a pickup truck that's utilized to tow our variety of trailers that we have different types of equipment in. We have a boat and a trailer that's housed at the station. And we have a UTV, which is a utility terrain vehicle. It's a Polaris Ranger, which we added to the fleet 3 years ago, which gives us access to some of the conservation lands and trails, the bike trail, the beaches, and that's been a good addition to the fleet. What's been removed for the fleet, at least temporarily, is our forestry truck. Forever, we've operated a forestry unit, which is it's a pickup truck, a flatbed pickup truck with a pump on the back of it, which allows us to get to smaller areas for brush fires out in the woods. It's on essentially the same chassis as our mini pumper, which is why I put the asterisk next to the mini pumper. The forestry truck had some catastrophic mechanical failures this year, costing a lot of money. So we took a real deep dive, drilled down as to how many calls that truck was really going on and what the value it provided the town. It's an expensive unit to replace. It was going to be due up for replacement on this fiscal year as a capital request. We had a placeholder in there for $150,000. The number of calls, the number of times we used it just didn't really, there wasn't a big value in it. So we're going to be retrofitting our mini pumper with some forestry hose on it, which is, forestry hose is just essentially smaller fire hose. Doesn't deliver enough water to put out a building fire, but it's adequate for those fires out in the woods. So we're going to be retrofitting the mini pumper and reducing our fleet by that one vehicle. Next, I just want to go into some of the grants that we've received that we're managing this year and some of our grants from prior years to show you just some kind of alternative revenue that we've brought in and some alternative funding sources. So this first slide looks at grants that we're operating right now in FY24. The first one is an emergency management planning grant, and it's the Citizens Corps program. This is a grant offered by MEMA, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And we have in grant funding this year just under $15,000, and that money is being used for a trailer operated by the box CERT, so equipment to outfit that trailer. The next grant is a small grant, $2,500. This is the Brewster, Chatham, Eastham, Harwich, and Orleans. This money comes from the old Medi Center 5, which is now Fontaine, over in East Harwich. When Medi Center 5 closed, there was some leftover funding, and that gets dispersed on an annual basis until it runs out to these 5 towns. So a small grant there, which we'll use to supplement some of our EMS supplies, our medical supplies. The next one is another MEMA grant, similar to the first one I mentioned. This is an annually recurring grant that we have to apply for. The amount funded is based on our population, our listed population for the town. So we get $2,700 annually for that, which we use to purchase dry suits for our water rescue team. So we have kind of a rotation in those suits. We bought them all in alternating years so that they don't all expire at the same time. So each year we try to buy 2 new suits and then retire out our 2 oldest ones. The next one is Department of Fire Services, Massachusetts. It's an equipment grant. We are in the 3rd year currently of a 5-year grant program. In each of the past 3 years, we've gotten approximately $13,000, and that's been used for a variety of equipment from firefighting turnout gear, our protective equipment, cold water rescue suits, dry suits, and then this year we applied for thermal image cameras. We've received money for gas monitors in the past, so it's a pretty comprehensive list as to what we can apply for. So that grant always offsets some expenses that would typically go in as a capital request. The next one is another Massachusetts Department of Fire Services grant. This is our Student Awareness of Fire Education and Senior Safety Grant. We get approximately $7,000 annually for that. And we've had our Student Awareness of Fire Education program running for about 25 years now. And that's when we go into the schools and teach fire and life safety education to the students at the elementary school. And a number of years ago, the state started offering some grant funding for senior safety, which we were ahead of the curve on because we were already doing it. We just didn't have grant funding. So we were actually one of the departments, one of the towns that the state looked at and said, this town's doing a really good job with this, collaborating with their Council on Aging, and they started offering some grant funding for those programs as well. And then lastly is Massachusetts Executive Office of Public Safety and Security Defibrillator Grant, another small grant, $2,500 to offset some expenses for defibrillators, which we outfit at various buildings around town. Next, we're going to look at some prior year grants. First on the list is our FEMA Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program, that's commonly referred to as AFG. We've been very successful in past years with our grants. It's a very competitive grant program. This is a national grant program, and there's a very complicated formula that goes into who gets what. It breaks it down. A certain percentage goes to urban departments, a certain percentage goes to rural departments, some funding goes to volunteer departments, some goes to full-time departments, and then it's broken down. They prioritize the types of equipment that you're applying for. So if you apply, if you're a small department with really good in a financially healthy town, and you're applying for a low priority item, you're very unlikely to get that equipment. So in the past, we've received our radio repeater systems, which a couple years ago was funded as a capital article. We put that in as a capital request. In case we didn't get this grant, we ended up getting the grant for $65,000, so that came off the capital. Second on that was our Lucas CPR devices. These are our mechanical CPR machines, which are critical. We got $75,000 for those to purchase 4 devices, so 1 for each ambulance and then 1 spare that stays at the station. And these perform CPR. They perform chest compressions, so we can free up a body that allows that person to focus on some of the other important tasks that need to be done during a cardiac arrest. It's also much safer for our personnel operating the back of the ambulances, so they're not having to stand up, do chest compressions on the way to the hospital. We put the mechanical device on there, and then that way our providers can stay seated and restrained with their seatbelts on. The third one was a training mannequin for $50,000. Sounds like a lot for a mannequin, but it's all computerized. We can control it with a tablet. We can give it an ailment, and then we can treat it. So the paramedics can actually put IVs into it. They can deliver medications. It has a heartbeat. It's got lungs and breathes. So it's pretty high tech. It's pretty cool, and we use that pretty regularly with all of our staff doing training in house. And then lastly, from AFG, we got the power load systems for our stretchers, totaling $86,000. And what that allows us to do is our stretchers hook up to a device mounted in the ambulance, and with a push of a button, it lifts the stretcher and loads it right into the truck, and which has paid huge dividends in reducing injuries and the long-term effects of having to lift people up and down.
Tommy has a question, Chief.
Sure.
Thank you. Who applies for these grants?
I do.
You do?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So the ones that all the ones I've mentioned today, I wrote the grant application for. And then Deputy Chief Clark has started, since he was promoted last year, has started taking over some of the grant writing and management roles as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Chief, you mentioned the word, I heard the word rural in there somewhere. And I know in the past, Chatham has been designated a rural community by the Department of Agriculture. Are we still?
We are,
Still,
and it's
which means we can apply for certain grants that other
Yeah.
cities cannot.
and it's tricky. It's a little bit of a moving target. That's part of the conversation right now. Is how do you determine a community like ours to be rural when they're not at all rural for a few months out of the year, based on the population and the seasonal aspect of the community. So one of the things that they are looking at with some of these grants is how do they kind of find that middle ground in what's available for grant funding, whereas we wouldn't typically need as much money and equipment as some other rural communities, but come June, July, August, and September, we really turn into a city.
Right.
Where we would benefit from some additional federal assistance.
I know their grants have been important to us for our sewer system. We've gotten some loans, not grants, but some loans from the Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, so with our grants, we're in a position right now. It's a fortunate position that most of our equipment is in really good shape, especially since we've been able to replace some of those things on the list right there, which is kind of leaving us struggling to figure out what we might apply for this year. because we don't have any items that are really on that high priority list. So until we get a few more grant cycles in, where some of that equipment starts to reach the end of its service life, we're not really up to be able to apply for it again. So, but in a few years, when our portable radios, our turnout gear, our breathing apparatus, when those things start to reach the end of their service life, then they start becoming eligible for grant application again.
Andy?
Thank you. Chief, I've been collecting a couple of questions here.
Sure.
You've been provoking them with some of the stuff you were talking about. The brush breaker forestry vehicle. Last year, as I recall, I asked you about how well we're doing in trying to address fire burden, wildfire burden in some areas, like off Broken Back Hill Road. Has any progress been made on that? Or?
We didn't have too many significant brush fires this past year. Very limited number. So we did work with DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation, to identify some of the areas around Goose Pond, and some of those areas where there was a lot of fallen trees and stuff that had gone unaddressed over the years. So they made progress in some clearing. And, you know, we've been kind of proactive as we've found out about some of the activity out and around those pond areas from children having, you know, small campfires and stuff, on really just trying to address those issues as they come up.
I imagine there's some other areas besides Goose Pond, but nevertheless,
Sure.
I mean, that was the example I used last year.
And it typically has been kind of our biggest area of concern.
Right. You know, one of the encouraging parts about increasing the staffing was to try to take care of, I guess it's morale, as well as, you know, other issues where you had to have too many callbacks.
Yep.
Right, because multiple calls at the same time. You know, are there any times now when the station is essentially unmanned?
It does still happen. One thing we've done in the past year is we've increased, with the increase in our staffing with the 4 new personnel that we put on over the 2 fiscal years. The way we used to operate is, in the off-season, we would drop to a 5-person minimum. And we've increased that to a 6-person minimum now. And the thought behind that is we're still doing our own dispatching. So that person doesn't really count as an operational person to go on calls. So when there's 6 people on, we have 5 people to respond on calls. And that at least gets 2 calls taken care of or started. Whereas before, with a 5-person minimum, if 3 people went out on an ambulance call, that left a single person to respond on the next call. And with the number of calls we're doing these days, it just wasn't adequate. We were relying on mutual aid far too much, and they're all facing the same crunch that we are. Harwich, Orleans, Brewster, all our closest towns are all facing the same staffing crunches, and it really just wasn't fair to expect them to come in and take our second call. So we're doing better, as far as, you know, there's been very few times where the station's been empty, and by empty, I mean only a dispatcher being there. And that's in large part because we've increased that minimum staffing level.
And lastly, I guess, sort of along those same lines, last year we were talking about you were talking about the program at the tech school, trying to encourage some younger people to be interested in fire services. Is that, do you think, going to work out, or is it?
It seems like it is. From last year's program, I know of at least a few that are already on departments on the Cape. A lot are getting their start up in the West Barnstable Fire Department, because it's still primarily a volunteer department. And it's really, West Barnstable's kind of become a training ground for the rest of the Cape. They give people a foot in the door, they offer them some training, and then the full-time career departments are scooping them up. So there's always openings up there. They're always looking for fresh faces. Out of this year's class, there are several that are expressing a sincere interest in entering the fire service. I know of at least 2 that are going on to, they're going to college next year to go into a fire science program. We've interacted with one of the female students in the class who's come in specifically to Chatham on some weekends to do some shadowing. So the recruitment, I think, is working. Aside from the tech program, we also have a very involved partnership with Monomoy High School right now with their high school internship program. and we've taken on 3 high school interns this year. And they're all awesome, and they're all expressing a real interest in pursuing a career with the fire services. So
Great.
our
Thank you.
our hope is we can encourage them to come to Chatham.
Thank you, Chief.
And I think I didn't hit these last two, just the last two here. The MEMA Emergency Management Planning Grant from last year was for $5,000. And again, that $5,000 went to our Citizens Corps program, which is our CERT team, to purchase some uniforms and some other consumables for that team. And then lastly, our Commonwealth of Massachusetts Interoperable Radio System Grant from a few years ago, just under $50,000, which replaced some mobile and portable radio equipment for both the fire department and the harbor master's department. The police put in their own grant application for that, and they got some grant funding as well.
Chief, can you give us an example of how your emergency management people, volunteers are used?
Yeah, so the CERT team, they've been unbelievable, and they've become really kind of the gold standard for a CERT team in Massachusetts. They're used as an example everywhere. We have primarily used them for kind of special events. So they've assisted with the 4th of July parade, 4th of July fireworks, first night events and first night fireworks, assisting maintain the security around the fire station during those events because it's kind of a hub, but also assisting the police department with traffic control and crowd control. They've, since the start of COVID, have had a huge impact on the community with point of distribution vaccination clinics. They were delivering food to housebound folks during COVID that couldn't leave the home. So really a variety of different functions that they perform.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so that was kind of our look at calendar year 23. Now we're going to jump into our digital budget book and look at the operating budget for the fire department. Mark, that's not sliding over. Can you, I know it's a little bit of a tough view here, but I will assist in deciphering what all that says. So as I mentioned before, a majority of the increases for our FY25 budget are really personnel expenses, which are primarily contractual increases. By contractual increases, I mean there's a 3% cost of living adjustment built in for FY25, and we have 11 of our members are in steps. So that are going to get step increases because they're still in the first 6 years of their employment. So upon successful of each year of employment, they get a raise at the end of the year.
What year of your contract are you in right now?
We're in the final year of our contract right now.
Okay.
So with the increases in salary, as I mentioned, which are primarily contractual, the total impact on regular wages is a 4.5% increase. So that's the 3% increase for the cost of living combined with the step increases for our employees. And because our overtime and training budgets are tied to salary and wages, each of those line items are also going up consistent with the increase in salary and wages. Again, holiday pay, that's also based on the individual's pay rate. So that's going up also 4.5%, consistent with those salary increases. Our special teams account, you'll see a 10% increase. That's kind of a subsidiary training account, which is, it divides out the training expenses the training personnel expenses for members of our special teams, which include our members that are on the Barnstable County Technical Rescue Team, which is a regional team, members that are on the regional dive team, which we have two dive team members, our local water rescue team, which we have 15 members on, and they have some specialized skill. They're certified as boat operators, and they have special certifications to operate out on the water. And we also last year implemented a drone team, so we have 4 pilots on the drone team. So the special teams account funds the off-duty training for those members of those special teams. So you see 10%. There's the 3%, which is tied to the existing salary and wages increase, and then we also added some new team members this past year with some of our newer members of the department. So it's and it's a 10% increase, but it's really it's only a $2,250 total increase on that line. So the total adjustment for salaries and wages, when you take all those things together, is 4.2%. On the expense side of the budget, the biggest increase you'll see is in our purchase of services line item. Our purchase of services line accounts for things like monthly expenses for printers, scanners, phones, iPads, our cardiac monitors, and you see it's a pretty significant increase this year, 25%. 3% of that is built in as inflationary. And I know you can't read the notes probably, it's pretty small font, but if you've gotten familiar with the digital budget book, those notes are in there for you. So 3% inflationary. There's also built into that request a $2,000 increase for preventative maintenance and service agreements on our cardiac monitors. We currently have an annual preventative maintenance schedule with our cardiac monitors. And our vendor for that, they increased the price by $2,000 this year. So they set that rate annually. We can't lock into a long-term contract with them. It's just set on an annual basis. So that increased $2,000 this year. There's a $5,000 additional request for preventative maintenance and service agreements for our stretchers. All of our stretchers up until this year were still under warranty, and those warranties are set to expire. Our stretchers are our most heavily used piece of equipment on the ambulance, so we want to make sure that those stay in service and have the appropriate maintenance done to them. And then lastly, there's a $3,000 request for annual fire hose testing. Currently, we've done that in-house. We have a vendor come in and do our testing of all of our ladders, our extension ladders, and our ladder truck, and that company also offers hose testing. The expense for that would be an additional $3,000. It's a request I'm putting in rather than us doing it in-house. I think it's going to give us more consistency in how that hose is tested, better reporting and records on the hose that's been tested, which will be provided by that contractor, and also allow our staff to be focused on other important training rather than testing a hose. And reduce any likelihood of injury that they might incur by, slips and falls while they're testing hose out there. So that's the biggest request on the expense side. We also have a 20% increase on our continuing education line item. Our continuing education budget funds course fees for training. Some of it's mandatory training, such as recertification for our EMTs and paramedics, and it's also course fees for other types of training, fire training that our staff requests to go to throughout the year. One of the biggest challenges we've seen in the past several years is the closure of the Barnstable Fire Academy. We don't have a local fire academy anymore. We don't have a place to get any local training. And this past year, we had firefighters go to Maine, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Indianapolis, and Florida to get training. So slight increase on that line item just to assist with paying for some of those course fees.
Chief, are we never going to have a fire academy?
It's hard to say.
Use? What's the problem?
Well, the Barnstable Academy was shut down for contamination of the
Right.
pond over off Mary Dunn Road, but near the Barnstable Airport. They don't have a site selected for one right now. At one point in time, they talked about putting one in up at the Air Force Base. However, that's federal land. They couldn't really make it happen up there. One of the county did receive a grant for what they call a fire prop, a burn prop, which is essentially, it's not really a prop, it's a steel building. That's still they're in the process of constructing that over in the town of Yarmouth behind one of the Yarmouth fire stations, which will give us some access to training. However, since when that grant was received for the building itself, it was pre-COVID, costs skyrocketed. Now they only have enough money to barely put the structure up, and they won't have enough to put it was gonna be gas fed. So we were gonna actually be able to have fires in it. They just weren't gonna be organic materials. There was gonna be all gas fired props. So they don't have enough money for the plumbing and all the other equipment that they need to actually have fires in it. So once that's constructed, we'll be able to go over there and use it to do some types of training on. But it won't put our people in realistic environments where there's actually heat and flames.
Okay, thanks.
Next line item increase is on our operational supplies, and I just put in for 4% increase on that for inflationary purposes. I was consistent with my previous request of a 3% increase for inflation, an additional 1% for the 1% increase in call volume that we had. So our operational supplies budget primarily funds supplies for the ambulances, so that additional 1%, as we go on more calls, we burn through more supplies. Our vehicle and equipment maintenance budget, I'm requesting an additional 3%, and that's for increased labor rates. As we have done historically, is we use kind of a historical budgeting method where we look back at prior year expenses. And this has been a pretty consistent increase with our mechanic rates for working on all our vehicles of about 3% each year. And then lastly, on our meetings, dues, and travel line item, it's a big percentage increase of 50%, but it's a $1,500 increase, so small increment. And again, this is just to assist with some of that out-of-state, out-of-town, off-Cape travel that our providers are going to. The travel expenses related to that, so hotels and mileage reimbursements. And so with all that combined, on the expense side, that represents a 4.9% increase. So total, the 4.2% increase on the personnel side and 4.9% on the expense side, combined for a 4.26% increase overall for the FY25 budget.
Okay.
Shall I move on to emergency management?
Move on,
All right.
Chief.
Before I go on to emergency management, I'm actually just going to touch on capital, and I'll do emergency management and fire department capital at the same time. So the first four items on the list, or the first three rather, fire protective clothing, self-contained breathing apparatus, and radios. These are annually recurring requests for capital. Several years ago, we started to fund these on an annual basis and put a small amount in each year. As our turnout gear, our firefighting gear, our breathing apparatus, and our radios become damaged or reach the end of their service life within a year, this just puts money into a capital account to be able to replace them as needed. The fourth item is our administrative command vehicle, request of $54,720, and that's to replace a 2015 Ford with about 70,000 miles on it currently. Vehicle procurement's been very difficult from the time of order. We could be looking at anywhere from 18 to 24 months till we actually see a vehicle. So we're trying to get ahead of the replacement on that vehicle before the maintenance costs start to pile up.
Chief, who uses that vehicle?
So that currently is that vehicle that's being used by the EMS captain and staff.
Okay, thank you. Andy?
Chief, is that on the state bid list?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then for emergency management is our generator request, similar to the other annually recurring capital requests is our generators. We have some funding built up in that capital account right now for ongoing projects. So slight reduction in what we've asked for in years past, just to keep some funding going into that to continue the projects that we have going on. So this past year.
I'm
You go,
sorry,
Joanne.
can you tell us what some of those projects are?
Yep. So most recently, we completed the community center project in August. That permanent generator was installed. That's a full building generator over at the community center. The ongoing projects, one of them is putting in quick connect storm lugs at the fire station. If some of you can recall, a couple winters ago, we lost our generator over there. We have the portable generator that used to service the community center before the permanent one went in. So we want to outfit some of the critical infrastructure in town with the storm lugs, so that trailer can be, that portable generator, which is on a trailer, can get moved around on an as-needed basis if we need to make any quick connections for any generator failure. So there's that project. Similar project that we're looking into is installing those lugs at the fish pier, which would operate the ice machine over there. So if we get hit with a major storm, major hurricane, something in the warmer months, we would have a continuous ice supply over there for the residents.
Okay, thanks.
And just the one last one is in the upcoming year, we're going to be looking at replacing the generator at the town hall.
Okay, thank you.
So any other questions for capital? All right. I can pull up the budget book for emergency management, but it's pretty quick. It's pretty basic. As Carrie mentioned before, it's level funded. We've actually had a slight reduction of the $2,000 vehicle line item that was on there. So no huge changes with that budget. And then two other small budgets. One is our Cape and Islands Emergency Medical Services Annual Assessment. This is level funded at $5,990 for FY25. This is the assessment that we pay to the organization called Cape and Islands EMS. And it's based on the number of personnel on our roster, the number of EMS providers on our roster. Don't expect any, we're within the threshold where we could add several more staff members without that number going up. So we're in a comfortable spot there. Cape and Islands EMS offers, they're kind of an intermediary between us and our affiliate hospital, Cape Cod Hospital, where we get our medical direction out of. So in order to operate our ambulance license, we need to be affiliated with a medical director. So they kind of help facilitate that. They offer quality assurance and quality improvement on our reports, and they offer EMS training to our paramedics and EMTs.
Okay.
And then lastly is our oil pollution control budget, which is coming in level funded at a whopping $500 for FY25. And that's all I have.
Any questions of the chief? Thank you very much,
Oh,
Chief
Tommy's got
Tavano.
one. Tommy's got one.
Oh, Tommy.
I just want to commend you on your grant writing, because the figures you put out there, it's about 400,000 a year. That's excellent.
Yeah, and we're always trying to look for new grants. We kind of geek out sometimes, and we enjoy doing it, so.
Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Tavano. And up next is Chief Michael Anderson, Chatham Police Chief.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I just want to start off and say it is always an honor and a privilege to talk in front of this committee because you always have fantastic questions. And it's clear to me from personal interactions with every member of the board that you care about the public safety of this community and it is greatly appreciated. So thank you very much for your time today. I'd also like to thank Kerry. This is her first time with us, and just, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I told the Select Board that she's been great so far, so we're very happy to have her on board. As Kerry mentioned, our budget is totally up about 3.47%, but don't let the percentage frighten you. It's really just south of $120,000. It's always an interest of our numbers, our calls for service, as indicated in this first slide. I will say that 2023, what we did have was 7,205 calls for service. We are in a good position of a downward trend of crime. But that comes with an, oh, by the way, what does your police department do when we're not out fighting crime every day? It does give us more opportunity to engage with the community, to problem solve, to do more proactive activities. But I also want to just stress to you that even though it's a safe community, your police department and your fire department use the generosity of your committee and the Select Board that pad our training budgets and equip our capital items for our equipment. So we do train and we do equip both of our agencies the best we can to be prepared for when that downward trend changes to an upward trend. I just want to assure you and the community that you have a very highly qualified, highly trained, highly equipped public safety division. And again, greatly appreciate that. Calendar year 2023, these are our calls for service. Now again, I spoke to you guys last year, and last year was my first time in front of this committee, and we changed the numbers a little bit. We used to just take an aggregate total number of activity that we did per calendar year, and I didn't think it was a fair representation of actual calls for service. So when I say calls for service, I mean that's every time somebody picks up the phone and calls the police or waves us down or encounters us on the street to do something that requires us responding to a call for service. And that number last year was 7,205. Again, a little less than the year before and a little less than the year before that.
Tracy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's pretty great that that's gone down despite there being more people and like the fire service calls going up. Sometimes you would think with more people there'd be more crime.
So I think it was Andy's question, why was there more fire department activity? And I think the fire chief said, well, that's because there's more people around. And I think it's safe to say that the reason why our calls for service have diminished, it's because there's more people around. There's not as many soft targets like vacant homes or vacant businesses that used to be such a high number of our property crimes that we've had in the past. We just don't have that, or we haven't had that recently. And again, we benefit as a community for that. But that doesn't mean we're not doing anything. If you look on the bottom, there's a large number of 12,000, and those are building and property checks. And what that means is usually in the evening, and especially on the overnight, while we're home, while we're all asleep, members of the police department are out there shaking doors, checking public buildings, checking businesses, checking private residences. And they log that. They logged that for several reasons, and last year we had over 12,000 building checks alone. How many cars do we stop? Well, we stopped 544 cars last year. And again, the number to take away is, how many tickets did the police department write? And you can see that we only issued 48. And like I told the Select Board, we're not interested in enforcement. We're primarily interested in education. Does anybody have any questions about this? This usually has a couple of questions, otherwise I will move on.
Andy?
Yes.
Related to the issue of citations, does that include parking citations?
No, this is not parking tickets at all. Parking tickets increased,
'Cause I see that at the bottom.
yeah. The parking tickets increased significantly last year, and that was because of the institution of the Community Service Officer Program.
That was going to be my next question.
And actually, there's not a slide that represents that, but that's an excellent question. The cost of that program last year for 4 community service officers was about $40,000. Thank you. They themselves issued about $36,000 worth of violation fees, so it almost paid for itself. Anybody
And it
else?
was a lot easier to drive down Main Street.
And I appreciate that, and we'll get back to this
Okay.
in the next, in a few slides. Thanks, Andy. What does our staffing look like right now? Everyone's interested. Myself, Deputy Chief Lou Malzone, who is on the meeting remotely, he's in charge of our Special Services Division, and Lieutenant Andy Goddard, who is here, he's in charge of our Patrol Division. Currently, we have 5 sergeants, and all of those positions are filled. 4 are assigned to patrol, and 1 is assigned as a school resource officer. That leaves 14 police officers because we have a budget of 22 sworn officers. Of that 22, 14 are police officers. Currently, we have 3 vacancies. We have 3 openings, which we are currently trying to recruit and fill. And we also have an officer who is out on a long-term injury. So right now, the police department is down 4 positions, which is a challenge. We have 2 reserve police officers. They do not work patrol shifts. However, they are fully trained according to the Massachusetts Police Training Council. They could provide supplemental patrols in an emergency, but currently, right now, our policies and procedures do not dictate that. Of those 3 vacancies, it's interesting to note that 1 was a retirement, 1 was a transfer. He transferred away to another police agency, and the other position is tied up in a long-term litigation. We also have on the roster 4 dispatchers. All 4 of those positions are fully staffed now. We have 1 civilian animal control officer. That position is filled. And we have a civilian administrative assistant, and that position is also full. That makes the total personnel in the police department 28.
Tracy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that with being sort of 4 officers short, it's amazing what you guys do. Just watching like the big events like First Night and the 4th of July parade, and that it always goes off so smoothly. It's impressive.
Thank you. We've been very lucky. We have the opportunity to use mutual aid from other police departments, but again, they're short too. We've been very lucky with the addition of our CERT team. They, depending upon the assignment, can supplement but not replace a police officer or a firefighter. But thank you. It is a challenge. It is a challenge.
So Chief, with I'm sorry, you through, Tracy? When your 3 vacancies, how many are you able to recruit for right now?
2,
2?
yes.
And are you having trouble recruiting?
Yes.
And what's the problem?
It's a very competitive market right now. The housing on the Cape obviously is a challenge. So I have to find somebody that lives on the Cape, that has ties to the Cape, that has roots on the Cape. It doesn't do me any good as a chief of the department to have an officer who works over the bridge. And I'm not really concerned about the distance. I'm concerned about the officer wellness. Because Right now, with our staffing shortages, it's conceivable that that police officer, if they live on the other side of the bridge, let's say they work a double, and it's July. Now they have to go home and rest, recharge, and return. They might have only 8 hours to do that coming back to another double, and we know that's impossible. They're not gonna get 8 hours of downtime between their 16-hour shifts. So they come to work tired.
Yeah.
And again, I know the fire department might have crow flies restrictions on how far you can respond, to backfill the fire station. I don't want police officers to live on the other side of the bridge, just specifically for the reason for officer wellness. Right now, we don't. It's also a challenge because it's a competitive market between towns. The compensation packages that we're up against, some of them are very good. It's a challenge for us to equal and maintain and hopefully surpass some of these other agencies because, quite frankly, one of the easiest ways to get staffing is to have a police officer laterally transfer from another agency to us.
Whose training has already been paid for.
Correct.
And that's what you lose when one of your fully trained officers leaves the force.
Ms. Sprague, it's not even to the point where the training, to me, is the most important. It's the housing. If I'm taking a police officer from another Cape Cod Police Department, I will gladly train them more as long as they live on this side
Yeah.
of the bridge. That's the challenge.
Thank you.
And just to expand on the current police academy situation, we're at their mercy. Currently, the Plymouth Police Academy starts this coming Monday. We do not have anybody scheduled to be in that class. Our next opportunity for a police academy may be July with the opening of the new Cape Cod Police Academy in Falmouth. Let's say I'm lucky enough to identify somebody off the street to be a police officer. Day one, they start the police academy in July. Let's say I'm able to fill both or all three of those positions with an off-the-street police officer. I get them into the police academy in July, which is not a guarantee, because every other police department is vying for those seats. But let's assume I get them in. Police academy starts in July. They'll graduate on or about Memorial Day next year, okay? Then they come back to the police department for a field training program. They're able to work on their own, maybe August, September of next year. So while it is a benefit to hire a police officer off the street, someone that we think is going to be a good fit for the department and the community, we can mold them to what we want them to be. They can conform to our policies, our procedures. They get it. They figure out the way we police in Chatham, because quite frankly, I think we police different from a lot of other departments on the Cape. But now I have to wait for that officer to get trained, and it's a substantial wait. The option right now is laterals. There used to be a handshake, wink, and a nod between Cape Cod police chiefs that we wouldn't steal each other's personnel, but those days are long gone. And I think somebody from the board mentioned is the police union contract up? We're negotiating right now. And, I think the town manager and I have an idea of what needs to be done, and I hope we get there.
Kristen, and next Tracy.
I know we asked the same question last year, but how do we measure up to other Cape towns and what we pay our officers?
We could do better. We could do better.
Thank you. I guess that sort of relates to what I was going to ask, is that do we need to have more desirable packages for encouraging lateral moves?
The political answer to that question is yes. Anything that, whether it's compensation or benefits that makes Chatham more attractive than another Cape agency obviously is worth it. And I think right now, during these contract negotiations, I think we're on the right track. Great question. Okay, I'll move on. Thank you. Just a quick look at our fleet. Luckily, we don't have big-ticket fleet equipment like the fire department does. We have 6 marked Ford Explorer police interceptors. The oldest is 2017. The newest is 2021. You graciously granted us 2 replacement cruisers last year. They're not here yet. They should be here within the next couple of weeks, maybe. They're in the pipeline to be painted and equipped. We have a Mitsubishi Outlander, which is an electric vehicle, which is assigned to the school resource officer. We have a 2010 Ford pickup truck, which, again, we replaced on the budget last year with a 2024 F-250. That has just been issued a VIN number. So again, we are in the production pipeline. It's just, we're at their mercy. The 2012 Ford Econoline van was supposed to be replaced, and the new one, the Ford Transit, was supposed to be here yesterday. The person at the dealership who was supposed to make sure everything was good to go has been out sick. So hopefully the beginning of next week. We have 3 admin unmarked vehicles, an Expedition for myself, a 19 Explorer for the deputy, and an 18 Tahoe for the lieutenant. Just thank you for those. Those are fully equipped, just like the marked cruisers, except they don't have the equipment to carry a detainee. They don't have the exterior lights, and they're not painted. But they have everything that we need to respond to a call, respond to an emergency from off-duty or from our homes. We have a Durango and an Expedition and a Charger, which are used in support. The Charger usually is assigned to the court officer. And we have a motorcycle, an ATV, and a Humvee. Our total vehicles, without our support trailers, totals 18. And again, we would be looking for, in the slide coming up, hopefully a replacement for the 2 marked vehicles. Any questions on the fleet?
Yes, Chief. What do you use your Harley Davidson for?
So that's our motor unit. The motor unit right now is we don't have a certified motorcycle officer. I had a certified, well, we used to have a bunch of certified motorcycle officers. Myself was one of them, but you get promoted out of that position. So the last certified motor officer we had, he retired. We had a school last year, but the officer got injured prior to the school and he could not attend. We're trying to get this officer enrolled to be certified as a motor officer this spring.
And what does he do?
Depends. If the weather permits, that motorcycle is used as a patrol vehicle. It's used primarily road races, parades, support, escorts. The motor officer usually would belong to a Cape team of motor officers. The Cape Cod Regional Law Enforcement Council's team, they have a motor unit, and they do funeral escorts, graduation escorts, parades, dignitaries. You've seen them in the parades.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. We're looking to replace 2 cruisers for replacement. $55,000 each for a total of $110,000. This is a regular replacement of our police cruisers to keep the fleet up and running for emergency response, routine calls for service, and patrol duties. By rotating and replacing the marked line cruisers on a regular basis, it maximizes the vehicle's worth in a regular 2-year trade cycle, and it maximizes the savings by keeping the mileage low and the repair low. As long as we keep it under a certain amount of years, mostly all of our repairs are warranty anyways. And again, the benefit is what you see on the left is the equipment as far as the consoles and the computer equipment, and just behind the driver is the compartment for the detainees. Ford has not changed their body style, so we would be able to take the old interior equipment and move it into the new vehicle, which saves us a lot of money. Where we take the hit is if Ford changes the body style a little bit. Now the current equipment that we have just doesn't fit, and then that's when we have to replace it. This is not one of those years. Okay, you would think this is the smallest item on our tool belt, but this unfortunately is one of the most expensive. We're looking to add and replace 3 new Motorola radios. So in 2022, we replaced all of our radios through a grant. And we were lucky to do that because these are very, very expensive. However, the grant only gave us a certain amount of radios, and with the inclusions of the additions of the community service officer program, wear and tear, replacement, sometimes they do break. We need to replace 3 of them. We were going to include this in our operational budget, but Kerry and I agreed that this is a significant cost. They cost roughly $5,300 a piece. So what you see there is a microphone, the radio, the base charger, replacement battery, and we're looking for 3 for a cost of $15,900. And again, it's a lot of money for a piece of equipment. However, the radio on the police officer's belt is pretty much, in my opinion, their most important piece of equipment because we don't communicate with each other via cell phone. We communicate with each other through radio. Through that radio, I can talk to my dispatcher, I can talk to my other officers, I can talk to my neighboring police departments, I can talk to my neighboring state police, I can talk to many different people through this radio. I've got several channels, I've got several banks. And again, they're not cheap, but they are certainly the most, in my opinion, one of the most important pieces of equipment that we carry. So thank you for that. Okay. In 2020, Massachusetts rolled out the Police Reform Act. Now, this was in the result of the George Floyd incident, and the Post Commission was established. And I'll be brief. The Post Commission established a new set of training and certification requirements for police officers. Basically means you have to have a license now to be a police officer. They've increased and they've standardized the equipment, the training. And one of the things that the Post Commission in 2020 initiated was a body-worn camera task force. And again, I'll be brief. The state was tasked to come up with this body-worn camera task force. And ultimately, it says they encourage police departments to get body-worn cameras and wear body-worn cameras for liability, for use of force incidents, to hopefully exonerate police officers from claims or complaints. So when the state does this, they usually say, hey, look, we're going to change the radio program. You all have to carry these radios. We're going to purchase the radios for the Commonwealth. And now you're on the hook for the replacement, the repair, or any additional equipment. So we waited since 2020, and that ship never sailed. The state never made a large purchase of body cameras. And they changed their philosophy from, we're going to provide you to, you better go out and seek your own funding for this. So seeing this on the horizon, we were going to bring this to this board last year, but I waited because, quite frankly, I wanted to see what the other Cape police departments were going to do to see what worked and what didn't work in their communities. So right now, there are 5 communities on the Cape that have body cameras. There are 6 other police departments that are just like me who are rolling it out in front of their finance committees this year to be rolled out in use fiscal '25. So what we're looking at is 22 cameras for a purchase price of about $150,000. What has happened is the cost for these items has decreased significantly. And one of the things that we were always up against was the storage of the data and the maintenance of the hardware and the software of the equipment. The cameras are easy. They're the cheapest item in the chain. The data, the storage, the downloading, the censoring, and how it's managed is usually the part that incurs the most cost. But luckily, over the past few years, these costs have significantly decreased. So I'm mirroring our policy to a community that's similar down Cape. We've got 3 major brands that we look at. They're all on the state bid. The prices are very reasonable. They all do about the same thing. Why would we pick one as opposed to the other? Basically, I'm going to ask around to the other police chiefs, what do you like, what don't you like? But again, and one of the things that I think that is unique about this is the ability to promote our officers' accountability, to highlight their professionalism. The joke is, you know, boy, I'd love to watch your body camera of one of your officers for 8 hours. Well, luckily you're not going to watch a lot. There's, you know, you're going to see them book a crash. You're going to see them talk to civilians. You're going to see them stop by the school. You're going to see them, you know, performing their duties positively and professionally. Where it really benefits the department and the community is, fortunately or unfortunately, when there is a significant use of force event that's captured. Or, again, hopefully to be used as exoneration for an unfortunate frivolous complaint, which we're not immune from. The select board brought up a question, maybe make it 25 and maybe include the community service officers or the animal control officer. I think right now I would rather adhere to the state guidelines and just really keep it with the police officers first. I will say that one of the questions that was brought up is, well, is it a change of working conditions? What does the union say? I can tell you, I've spoke with the union at great lengths with this, and they are just as for body cameras as I am. There will be no union pushback. We're currently, like I said, in negotiations now, and this came up, and it was like, yep, that's great. We support them too. So we have tremendous cooperation with the police union on this. It's a big change of the community. This is one of those things that, you know, like, this is a pretty advanced piece of technology that, you know, that is coming into Chatham. But it wasn't that long ago where, you know, we didn't have patrol rifles in our cruisers. And right now, I wouldn't get in one if it didn't have one. I wouldn't feel safe. I wouldn't feel that I would be performing my duties adequately with my equipment without that equipment that I might need, God forbid, in an emergency. So again, $150,000 for 22 body-worn cameras that would be purchased fiscal '25 and rolled out, and we're looking for your support with that too. I appreciate it.
Andy?
Chief, I'm glad to see you're going this way, but my understanding is one of the byproducts is hundreds and if not thousands of hours of video that have to be reviewed and somehow vetted for whether they have evidentiary value or it's just junk, essentially.
So to answer your question, we have a surveillance system at the police department. We have cameras in our booking and holding facilities that are video and audio. We have another set of cameras that are in our facility that if you walk in the lobby, it's video, not audio. That has a storage life, I think it's 3 months. If we have a detainee, no matter if it's a PC, an arrest, we always capture that, download it, and save it. We don't save the lobby videos unless we think that there's a problem, and usually, if somebody files a complaint of something, or there was something that was noteworthy that occurred in the lobby, we're aware of it, if not immediately, the next day or the next day. We can grab that. It will be an added duty of myself, the deputy, and the lieutenant to review this. It's not difficult. There's been significant improvements in the technology as far as the storage and the data retrieval. Part of our policy would be that, look, I'm trusting you as a police officer to wear this camera. I should not have to come to work the next day and sit and fast forward through your camera to watch what you didn't or did not do. I'm gonna trust you. But the responsibility is on, you know, myself included. If this goes through, I'll be wearing one myself. So it's on me and it's on them to, you know, again, I think that they do a fantastic job, but their accountability would have to be maintained with these cameras on or off. Sometimes they record passively, but there are certain times where you have to activate them. Based upon the system you get, if you draw your taser, they come on automatically. If you draw your firearm, they come on automatically. If you turn your cruiser lights and siren on, they come on automatically. But you're right. And again, would we have to watch 16, 24 hours of footage? We don't think that we have to. We would have the ability if we needed to, but we don't see that as part of the new requirement to, again, review every minute of every hour of every police officer's daily duties.
That might put you to sleep.
Or again, I try to turn it around as a positive note. I would love, you know,
Sure.
someday you'll see our officers doing great things.
Right. No, I don't dispute that. No, I understand that it can also record a lot of good things.
Yeah, but again, you might see hours of just that steering wheel being turned in front of you. If you know, it's. But again, they are a very valuable tool to have if they are needed.
Do you think at this point that the state regulations and your own policies adequately address privacy issues?
I think the privacy issue is addressed. Upon a citizen contact, the officer is usually required to say with these cameras on, hey, just so you know that you're being recorded. On a vehicle stop, that would be the script. The officer or myself, let's say, for example, this was already in place and I was here for the Finance Committee for something else, the policy would allow me to take this off. It would not be recording. This wouldn't be you know, but, you know, heaven forbid if somebody comes in and upsets, you know, a meeting, sure. we can put it back on.
Right.
The biggest hurdle is that Cape Chiefs are facing right now is the state requirements on the officer when he or she writes their report. And what I mean by that is, without the body camera, I have to perceive everything I do, and everything that I do, I have to justify that based upon my perception in that second, okay? So I base my actions and I write my report based on that. Two schools of thought. Now that you have the camera, some would say, hey, look, officer, you should write your report based upon your perceptions, not based upon the camera. Write your report and then watch the video. And if your report or the camera captures something that you didn't perceive, then you could supplement your report. The other school of thought is, no, you can watch the video and you can write your report based upon the video and your perception. Right now, it's a pretty even split. The state recommends you write then review. There are a lot of Cape Chiefs and a lot of Massachusetts chiefs that do not subscribe to that. they allow to review than to write.
Just interesting, because I know that the privacy issue has come up in other communities, and particularly for things like, service calls at somebody's personal residence, right, which could turn into something which could turn into something that needs to be recorded.
Yep.
But very often does not really turn into that.
Correct.
And so that and public records.
And again, with the public records, there are a multitude of appendixes and sections that we can deny requests for.
Understand?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. This is a slide for our operational budget. Hey, look, I respect your time. I'll be brief. We had a community service officer program. Unless I'm not hearing it from the right people, it seemed to be a success. We heard it from the citizens. We heard it from the merchants. We heard it from our community. Last year, we had 4 community service officers. So last year, we had 4. One of the things that came up in our meetings after the season with the merchants and some of the community members is, geez, I wish they could do more. I wish they could enforce the parking at the beaches. I wish they could enforce the parking at Schoolhouse Pond. I wish they could go and greet people in West Chatham or, even Lighthouse Beach, because their patrol area was strictly on foot downtown. So we're asking for one more, and that would be an additional cost of $13,000. And I will say, it's an incredible return on the investment from what I've seen so far. Out of the 4 community service officers that we had last year, I've got 3 coming back. I've got 2 coming back committed full-time. One might be a challenge because of her schedule, because she's now doing a college program. So I've got 3 coming back, and we already have interested applicants to fill that 4th and hopefully 5th position. And that 5th position would be a mobile position. We have fleet vehicles available, and we also have 2 electronic bicycles that they can utilize, which has been great. So again, it's just a temporary wage increase, seasonal, not benefits included, no overtime, for $13,000 for a total of $62,000. You'll see that in the line by line.
Andy?
I gotta ask, do you see this position at all as perhaps a tryout for eventually becoming a police officer in Chatham?
Andy, I'm going to read from my notes here. So last year, I think it was you that mentioned, and I think we referred to it as a farm system. Okay? So the answer to that is yes, but no. I have community service officers that are interested in becoming police officers. However, their age, they're college aged. So for me to reach down and take them at the end of this summer or next summer, they're not, quite frankly, they're not old enough. But they're in the criminal justice program, some of them are. So, upon completion of their schooling, if they meet the age requirement of 21, the minimum age, if they applied here, having served here, you can imagine that they would be right at the front of the line. I will say this, though. We have a conditional offer out to a candidate who is in a college program through Fitchburg State College. Fitchburg State has a criminal justice program, 4-year bachelor's degree. Then they go to the Fitchburg State College MPTC Post-Certified Police Academy. We go to the college fairs. We go to the Fitchburg State College fairs. We've had this candidate come down. Quite frankly, this candidate is highly qualified. This candidate has been offered a conditional offer of employment. However, they still have to graduate in May. Then they have to complete the police academy. So the farm system, it's not a yes. Like, quite frankly, when I was a reserve police officer here, I was out of college when I worked here in 92 and 93. I could have stayed but I went back to Central Mass for a couple of years and came back. Certainly, if they have this on their resume, they would be an excellent ideal candidate. Okay. Quickly, before I get into the budget book, I will be happy to say that the animal control budget, other than her salary, is level funded. We have one civilian animal control officer. She does a fantastic job. She had 862 calls for service last year. That's not the entire numbers, but those are the big ones. 862 calls for service, that's a pretty busy year for one animal control officer. And again, we're not asking anything we supplemented her budget last year. Thank you. And other than her salaries, it's level funded. But again, it's a very, very important position in this town. It's amazing the amount of wildlife calls for service, not just cats and dogs, but I'm talking, wildlife, what's that? Coyotes, livestock, stuff like that. So again, it's a very valuable position. All right, I am gonna try this. I think if I do this, I'm sorry.
It should be open still. Chrome. I guess Mark has to do it. Mark, can you get the budget book up?
He's working on it.
Oh. Okay, I think he's bringing it up. I wonder why it's doing that. Good job.
Trying.
You're doing great. Except for this. What is it doing?
It's not your fault, Chief. We know that.
There we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trying. What'd you guys do? What did I do? What happened? It's not letting us take it over there.
No. Maybe just close out of those?
Yeah. Goodbye, and yeah, we're mirroring, so.
Never mind, chief, we'll just vote for the whole thing.
Appreciate it, thanks.
This is where you want to be, right?
Yeah.
Yep, you can. Thank you. Sorry.
Oops. You want police, right? Okay, there you go. Sorry about that.
No, we're good.
There you go.
Apologies. Okay, thanks. So again, as the fire chief mentioned, our regular wages went up just with the municipal growth fund. And just my notes on the side, just to break out what that number means, what the admin's piece of the pie is, what the union's piece of the pie is, and what the dispatch union's piece of the pie is. So the temporary wages you see on the screen is, again, that would be the addition of that one community service officer position. Again, temporary wages, not benefits, no overtime. And again, don't be afraid of the percentage increase. You know, just focus on the fact that 17.2 really means only an increase of just a couple thousand. And that's in longevity. And again, like the fire chief mentioned, his longevity increased also. This is a positive increase. This is showing that we have retention and seniority in the positions. And that's the goal here. That's really what we're trying to accomplish. And again, we appreciate that. So there's an increase, again, the 6.4 really only means an increase of about 6,000, of about $5,800. So the two big ticket items in the purchase of service this year, our building was built in 2011. Our holding facility, where our detainees are kept, the cell block, the booking area, has to be maintained because it has to be inspected. It's inspected yearly by the Department of Health and the Department of Youth Services. So some of the hardware and the equipment in our detainee area is getting a little bit old. And what we have done this year, we've been able to pay for it with our current budget, is we had to hire a service of a private contractor who's licensed and certified to replace the hardware, replace the vanities in the cell block, the doors, the locking mechanisms. Because now we run the risk of not passing inspection. And again, it's an $800 fee for a year. And again, it's well worth it because, quite frankly, we haven't had a violation, and I'm proud to say that we've been in full compliance, and I just would like to maintain that. Second thing is, we have policies and procedures, rules and regulations, bulletins, orders, but our policies and procedures, we are now on the road to Massachusetts state accreditation. It is a significant amount of work to become accredited. What that means in layman's terms is that if we are recognized as accredited, it shows that we at the department have the policies and procedures and operate as best practices as recognized by the Commonwealth. That means that our current paper policies have to be converted electronically for upload, issue, maintenance, reissue. It's able to be audited by the accreditation committee. It has a couple of really cool functions. It allows us to issue policies not only with a sign-in sheet that say, hey, I reviewed the policy, but now we have the ability to issue the policy, see if they read it. We have the ability to test on it, review on it, and quiz on it. It also maintains a historical archive of every time we change the policy. And that's important because let's say an officer follows the policy today, and then there's a lawsuit, and then the policy changes, and then the policy changes, and then that lawsuit gets to court and says, well, your officer wasn't following your policies. Well, he was following the policies at that date and time, and here's the historical archive of that policy. It's a significant amount of money for the software, but it is extremely worth it. And the reason why we chose this software is the Massachusetts Accreditation Commission uses this software, so they encourage us to use the same software that's easy to be in compliance. So what happened is we're asking for the first year of $5,800 for this software and hardware to be purchased through our purchase of services. IT, the town's IT department, are going to pick up next year's bill of $5,800 in January of 2025 and $6,400 in January 2026. You will see that in IT's budget when they present it. So that's the increases in purchase of services. Again, extremely valuable. Uniforms, we have to stay on course with the Consumer Price Index. It reflects a 4% change in the cost of uniforms. Unfortunately, these aren't cheap. The equipment's not cheap. But that's, again, it's the cost of keeping up with the uniform costs. Meetings, dues, and travel, that's significant because this is really, again, it's 24%, but it's really only $2,400. Select dues for professional organizations and foundations have increased over the past years significantly. And I'll read from the notes. These professional organizations, they provide guidance and support, not just to the heads of the organizations, but to the department as a whole, that assist us with operations and certifications. What's important is that membership to these organizations are crucial for our professional, personal, and operational development. Some of these professional organizations include the Police Executive Research Forum, the FBI Leadership Academy, the Cape Cod Regional Law Enforcement Council. Again, they're the agency that we call for that maintains the SWAT teams, the search and rescue teams. Massachusetts Women in Law Enforcement, the Massachusetts Juvenile Police Officers Association, and of course the International Association of Chiefs of Police. So we appreciate your support with that.
Excuse me, Chief, I'm going to interrupt.
Sure.
I need to ask Mark if we are limited to 3:30 today? No, okay, thank you. Continue, Chief.
We don't have to go past 3:30 because I'm finished.
I hope I didn't hurry you.
No, we are finished. Thank you. That was the last one.
Are there any questions from the board? From the committee, rather? Andy?
With regard to overtime, I noted that it looked like it was doing fairly well.
It's going to go up.
Well, that was kind of my next question. All right, what do you base that on?
The vacancies. It's going to be directly related to the vacancies.
So all the additional hours that are being put in by your existing staff, they kick into overtime. All right.
Unfortunately.
Yes. Well, I don't see if there's any other way around it. The other question is, does the Barnstable County still provide technical assistance to the department for things like radios?
They do.
They do, okay.
And I will compliment Sheriff Buckley. There was talk in the campaign between the two candidates that some of that assistance might be going away. Thankfully, her campaign did not trumpet that, and she's actually increased her budget and increased her staffing. So all of the assistance that we used to rely on the sheriff's department for, primarily housing our prisoners, providing technical assistance with our radios, most of our crime scene management. They do most of the photographs, the fingerprints, the evidence collection, and they supply also a canine. That is still fully funded, fully robust, and fully available, and we appreciate that.
All right, good. No, I'm glad you mentioned it, because I think sometimes people wonder, in fact, what the county still does, but.
No, I
as an example-
I can't speak more highly of Sheriff Buckley. She's been great.
Great, thank you.
Tommy?
This is for Kerry. Do we get copies of this, what's on the screen?
That on the screen is actually in your book.
His comments on?
That's because the notes were probably put in after the fact. So I can get you that.
Yeah, okay.
That's fine. Or if you went online, yep, it would be there too. Yep,
It would be there, okay.
yep, all of the comments are there.
Okay, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Tommy, I will add on to that. I don't see my notes changing now. I think we're pretty much done, which is great. So I think what you see in the budget book, if you put eyes on it today, that is going to be what it is.
Right, but I do like to look at your comments, because you had comments on the side.
Yes, yep.
Yeah, well, they're not in here.
They should be,
They're not in our printed copy.
gotcha, yeah.
Right, they're-
If you look online, they will be there
Yeah,
online.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more questions of the chief? Chief, thank you so much, and again, thank you and all of your officers for your service to
No,
us
thank you.
every single day.
Thank you very much. I appreciate.
Oh, Andy?
I can't read that big screen in terms of people who are participating, if anybody outside wants to say anything,
Good, thank you.
okay? But, so I brought it up on my laptop. I still don't see any raised hands, so I assume we're okay. We'll find out.
Okay, thank you. I forgot that. Okay, well, I guess that's it for today. I do want to say a shout out to Norma Avalar, who's been a member of this committee since 2007, and who has recently retired from this committee. And to tell Norma, we miss her greatly, and good luck in her retirement. So if there's, and I also want to remember to thank Mark Van Bork for Chatham TV. And no other discussion, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, mostly having to do with our future meeting schedule, which was distributed in an email.
Yes,
Right, apparently next Tuesday, we've got DPW,
yes,
all right?
Yep, that's correct. DPW, and then Thursday will be natural resources
Okay,
and community development.
right.
Yep.
Great, thank you for the reminder.
and you're giving me a motion for adjournment?
Now I will, sure.
Thank you.
I'll move, we adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. All right, Kristen Andres,
Yes.
Tracy Shields,
Yes.
Tommy Doan,
Yes.
Andy Young,
Yes?
and the chair, Joanne Sprague, agrees. Thank you to all of our listeners, and we'll see you next week.